Nutrition for runners is a massive topic on which you all have so many questions, and I love it because it is an incredibly important part of training and hitting our goals. Coach Amanda here from Run to the Finish. I have been coaching for over a decade, running for 20 years, and I feel like I am always still learning and tweaking my nutrition. So today I want to share with you an interview that I did with registered dietitian Serena Marie, where we talk about pre-fueling, during, after, and even a little bit on that night before your long runs, really to help you start asking yourself some questions, start understanding which pieces are important, and maybe where you need to dive a little bit deeper. Once you go through this, you'll see some links below for additional resources and places that you can deep dive into each of those sections. All right, it is time to talk nutrition. So this is a massive discussion, which we could go into in-depth things on every single piece of it, and we have. That's why we created a course. But the goal here is to give you some initial things to think about, tips, questions to ask yourself. Are these the pieces that are holding you back from busting out of your plateau? So our first area, as always, is the pre-run fueling.
Yeah, so when it comes to pre-run fueling, there's so many variables, right? Because I think sometimes people are like, well, I don't have time to do that, or it doesn't sit well in my belly, and they just skip it. And as much as I know it feels easier to just skip it, it is actually really important that we figure it out, right? So if it's the kind of situation where you don't have a lot of time to digest your fuel, maybe you're running really early in the morning and you are going to do something, over 45 minutes, or maybe you're pushing the pace, or you're lifting in conjunction with your run, it's really important to try and have something super easy to digest. So in those situations where we don't have a lot of time to digest our fuel, I would recommend sticking to some really easy digestible carbohydrates. So something like 2 sweetened applesauce packets and maybe like a little bit of some kind of sports drink, or a big handful of dried fruit, or I really love like the dried banana chips, or like a Rice Krispies treat even, but something that's like pretty sugary and easy to digest, to just really quickly get out the door without having a whole lot of digestion going on while you're trying to do your workout. Now, this is versus somebody who maybe has an hour or two to digest before they head out to their workout. In that situation, we still want that carbohydrate component, but having a little bit of fat or protein there is just going to help to keep you full long enough that when you start to go running again, you're not like, dang, that Rice Krispie treat didn't hold me over for the next hour or two. So combining something carby like some low fiber toast, or a few big handfuls of like Cheerios or Honey Nut Cheerios, some kind of cereal that doesn't have too much fiber in it. And then pairing that with maybe some milk, or maybe you put a little bit of cheese on your toast, or a little bit of peanut butter on your toast. So that way we actually have something to kind of keep that carbohydrate hanging out in our bloodstream longer, so that when you go to work out an hour or two later, you're actually able to feel satisfied, but have enough energy to get you through.
So this is why I'm seeing PopTarts all over the place lately. So I think for a lot of people, Pop-Tart feels like, oh my gosh, that's not healthy. I shouldn't eat that. But why is something like that actually really useful, say before that run you're getting ready to do and you don't have time for a lot of food?
Yeah, so I'm really happy we're talking about Pop-Tarts, right? And I think it's so funny to have a dietitian like lighting up at the sound of the word Pop-Tart. But the reason for this is, what I always like to tell my clients is that a carb is a carb is a carb. Now, yes, certain carbs give you extra vitamins and minerals, and I'm all for that. But I almost would argue that if you're about to go for a run, we're less concerned with getting the vitamins and minerals, and we're more concerned with just getting the sugar or the energy for your muscles to perform. So Pop-Tarts are very low in fiber. I think they might have no fiber in them. Fiber is something that slows down digestion, can cause gastric distress, and can actually have the food sit in your belly longer, which is something we don't want when we're running. We kind of want that food moving quickly throughout our digestive system so that we can absorb those nutrients. So Pop-Tarts are things that are really sugary. Ultimately, everything has to digest down into either glucose, fructose or galactose. Those are the 3 sugar molecules that exist in the universe. So whether it's a Pop-Tart or a banana, it has to eventually break down into glucose, fructose, or galactose in the case of dairy sugar. So ultimately, it's like, who cares what it starts out as long as it's like something that's yummy, sits well in your belly, and is giving you enough energy to fuel your run.
Love it. So speaking of fuel your run, let's talk during the run. I think there's usually a lot of confusion about when do I need to start fueling during my run, and what does that need to kind of look like? So what are some questions to sort of ask ourselves there?
Yeah, so I think we need to ask ourselves, how long am I running? And generally what I like to say is if you're going for more than 75 minutes, then it's a good idea to fuel your run. Or if you're training for a race that's like a half marathon, a marathon, an ultra, then I'm almost like, hey, let's just practice this fueling strategy because we're going to need it for race day. So even if it's something like brand new you're trying for the first time and you're just running for 40 minutes, it's like, okay, we'll practice it. So that way, if it doesn't work, it's only a 40-minute run that you're experiencing discomfort on. But if you're running more than 75 minutes, I think it's a really good idea to think about hydration and mid-run fueling. And then what we want to kind of consider is, what kind of run are we doing? So Amanda and I were just actually talking about this a little bit before this run, but if you're doing something where you're doing like intense speed work or a really challenging tempo pace, or you're practicing race pace, then we really want to stick to something that's really easy to digest, things that are really carby and simple sugars. So things like the gels, the manufactured sports goods like chews or waffles, or then things like raisins or dates or cereal also could work too. Versus if you're doing something that's maybe more like a low heart rate pace, you're going out there for, an hour and a half plus, maybe you're practicing some trail running, you're training for an ultra, an Ironman. In that case, you may also want to take, in addition to your carbohydrates, something that has a little bit of fat and protein, like something like maybe a nut butter packet, for instance. So we want to think about, how long am I running for? What type of run is this? What type of race am I training for? So that way we know what kind of components we need to bring with us and practice during training.
I think you made a really good point there that people don't often think about, which is practicing fueling during speed workouts. So a lot of times we're just thinking about it during our long runs, but your gut is under a lot more stress during a speed workout, which is actually going to be more similar to how you feel on race day. And I find that to be a really surprising one for people, is that practicing then and testing out foods so that they do feel better on race day.
Yeah, I love that, because like you just said, we're mimicking not only like the way you might be feeling on race day, like, dang, this is hard, but also physiologically, when we're racing, we're generally putting our body under more stress. And even if you're like totally chill and relaxed heading to the track that day, you're doing a hard effort, which is going to increase stress in the body. So you are getting the chance to mimic that race day condition.
The other thing I often know is we think that during run fueling is really just about that run. But what we're actually doing here is trying to make sure that the recovery process is actually already in progress. And it sounds so silly, but doing it during your run so that you don't finish depleted, dehydrated, actually means that you're going to feel better on tomorrow's run too. So if you keep having this, I don't need fuel because I don't need the extra calories. I know there's a lot of that mentality. Start thinking about this as, what I'm doing right now is actually making all of my training better. And sometimes it's like those little shifts in how we think about what we're doing, right, that can help.
Absolutely. I love that we're talking about this. So often people are trying to figure out ways to cut calories, like Amanda just said. And instead, how we want to think about this is that every opportunity for us to eat is a way for us to help and support our body. Our body is our teammate. So I think a lot of people struggle with having reduced hunger signals after they're done with a long run or a hard workout. And so you come home and let's say you saved your calories by not eating or not taking in anything on your run. And then you come home and you have a little something and you feel really nauseous and sick, and then you don't eat a whole lot the rest of the day because you just are not feeling hungry, that's actually doing a disservice to your body. You're not giving your body enough of the nutrients and the building blocks to repair and recover after that effort that you did that day. And also, it tends to bite us in the butt eventually. Like, you probably a day or two later are going to be like ravenous with crazy sugar cravings. You're going to feel so out of control. And that's an uncomfortable feeling. So it's like, skip the drama. It's almost like, when you do something, like, I don't want to brush my teeth at night, I'm too tired, but I do it anyway to take care of my body. And that's how we should start thinking about taking mid-run fuel. Sure, you're not hungry. Like, rarely are people hungry in the middle of their hard run, but you have to do it the way you have to brush your teeth.
Yes, I love that. So one of the things that we often talk about is, as people say, like, nothing tastes good, I don't want to eat during the run, but we need to figure that out. So what are some ways to just sort of start dipping your toe in, and then maybe like, do we record, here's how I felt, like, here's what my stomach did, so that we can slowly progress that, train our stomach, just like we're training our legs?
Yeah. So our stomach literally can be trained. So if we think about when we're eating something in the middle of a run, our body is not expressing digestive enzymes. So I want us to think of enzymes like little scissors that like cut up our food so that we can break it apart and get energy from it. So when we first start going running, our body is kind of like experiencing stress because our body evolved to go running when we're like running from a lion. Like, we don't want to stop and like pick some berries and because we got hungry and then the lion eats us. So our body didn't evolve to naturally like express a lot of digestive enzymes while we're training. But we can actually teach our body that we do need to express more of those digestive enzymes by actually slowly introducing food during training. So like Amanda just suggested, if you have a training journal that you're sharing with your coach, or you just have one that you use to log your workouts, ran 6 miles today, 52 degrees, like whatever, maybe you write down what you ate and drank beforehand, and then what you ate or drank during your run, and then how you felt afterwards. GI distress, pooped my pants, felt great, like whatever it might be. Because then we can look at those variables and say, okay, well, this run, I ate flaxseed oatmeal beforehand, and I had some major GI issues. And you might realize that when you take that away and instead substitute it with like some, white toast and a little bit of banana and peanut butter, that solves the problem. Or maybe you realize, like, I tried taking a gel today and I hated the texture. It made me gag and nauseous. So next time I go running, I'm going to try something more solid. I'm going to have a handful of raisins with a little bit of salt on them, or I'm going to have like a chew, like a manufactured sport chew or something. So just by jotting this down and looking at the information, I would have the pre-workout snack as well as the hydration and the mid-workout fueling, and start slow. So if you've never eaten during a run before, don't go out there with like 10 different things. Like, choose one thing and maybe you just take half of it. And maybe that's what I was saying. Like, maybe you do this on a 30-minute run. You don't need to fuel, but you're testing it out. And you're like, hey, you know what? I took that on that 30-minute run. It felt okay. I think next time when I go on a 60-minute run, I'm going to double it and see how that feels in my belly. That's also teaching the body to express more of those digestive enzymes.
Perfect. You guys, I appreciate this because it's still an area I am trying to consistently get better at year after year after year. So I love it. So our third time is what we actually do after our run. So I usually get the question of, do I have to eat right after every single run? Is it when it's a certain length? And then, of course, as you always know, there is the, but I'm not hungry.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I want to address is that I'm not hungry. I don't care you're not hungry. Like, you need to figure something out, okay? And again, brushing the teeth analogy like comes back to play. Just because you're not feeling hunger signals does not mean your body does not need nutrition. So what happens when we run is we increase our body temperature. That can decrease hunger hormones, or I'm sorry, I keep saying hunger hormones, hunger signals. Also, we are creating stress hormone, cortisol, because we're running. That can suppress appetite as well. So just because your body is reacting to the run doesn't mean that we don't have a human brain that's smart, that understands that my body still needs nutrition. So if you're not feeling hunger after a run, I know this is easier said than done. I do not want to dismiss how uncomfortable it can be to refuel, but trying to drink your calories can be a really clutch solution. So whether you have like a pre-made sports drink, I'm like pretty lazy after I come home from a run. I got a bunch of pre-made sports drinks, like protein drinks that have 20 to 30 grams of protein in my fridge. I chug that in the shower. I eat 2 handfuls of raisins, and then that way I got my protein and carbs, and it didn't require a whole lot of effort or chewing. Maybe you make your own smoothie with some protein powder and you add some like dates and oats and bananas for some carbs. So really trying to get those protein and carbs is what we're doing. If it's really cold outside, maybe you get some like bone broth that has protein in it and you add some noodles or white rice or something, drinking that like soupy protein and carb combination, but just really trying your best to get something in. Research is kind of unclear. There's like a suggestion that we really want to try and refuel within a 30-minute to 2-hour window. What I usually tell my athletes is if it was a tough workout, let's really try and get that post-workout snack in within 30 minutes. If it was something more like leisurely, then okay, you have 2 hours. So, but that's a little bit of like the science interpreted by Serena. So just FYI. Okay, and essentially like you do need to eat. So like I was saying, emphasizing the protein and the carbohydrates, fat and vegetables, they are awesome. I'm not saying don't eat them, but if you don't have an appetite and we just have to pick 2 nutrients, we're really emphasizing protein, really trying to get 20 to 30 grams of protein at that post-workout meal. If you eat meat or fish, it's really easy. It's the thickness and size of your palm. If you're plant-based, it's a little bit trickier, but I like to say like a fist and a half of beans, a fist of edamame, several like fists of nutritional yeast. We can get creative. We can get the protein in. And then some kind of carb, white rice, toast, pasta, crackers, what have you. But just making sure you're getting something within that 30 minutes to 2-hour range.
Since I know we have a lot of women who are in their 40s and 50s and beyond watching this, that is where we have seen some data around that 30 minutes becoming even more important because we have so much more trouble maintaining muscle. It just breaks down on us so much faster. And if you aren't fueling quite enough before and quite enough during, eventually your body starts using muscle. So we want to be like restocking as fast as we can. And once again, we're thinking about what I'm doing right now is helping tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. So if you're looking at consistency over your training and aiming to hit that PR, it really isn't just about like that run. It's what you're doing that's going to keep sort of piling up day after day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of core power. You guys hear me talk about it all the time. And it is largely because I need something I can grab quickly. I can have it in my car after the trails because I am not always hungry. So I know I can grab some cereal, or if I'm at home, I can make the green smoothie. So be willing to get creative and know that, okay, if you have that green smoothie and then you're hungry 2 hours later, eat. I think that's the other thing we kind of do is like, oh, but if I eat right now, then what if I get hungry again? Yeah, I call it second breakfast or third breakfast at that point.
Yeah, I always tell my athletes, like, I like to think of if you eat a meal as your post-workout situation, snack, meal, whatever, that's fine. But I always say you still owe your body a post-workout snack. And the reason for this is because on days that we do work out, having the extra protein in some kind of snack later on in the day is only going to help you. So if you come home from a run and you have breakfast as your post-workout meal, totally fine. But then maybe later on in the day, you just also prioritize having another high protein like snack as well. And I also think core power is really delicious. So totally love that one.
I was with a group of athletes this weekend, and a number of them mentioned once they started either taking in a little bit, even during easy runs, and then figuring out just how to make that quick grab and go after, they were like, I'm more mentally alert the rest of the day. I'm not as cranky midday. So things that like we don't always associate with the fact that we didn't take the time to fuel right away show up later in the day too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hunger has like all these different manifestations. It's not just like my belly is rumbling. It can totally affect your energy, your mood, like how present you are in a situation. So like, why not boost your quality of life by eating something yummy?
Okay, gang, like I said, we could go so deep on all of these. I'm going to ask Serena one more topic because it goes in with our fueling. And that is, what about the night before a long run?
Okay. So I'm really big on thinking. So again, not everyone is training for a race. So I recognize that. If you are training for a race, I do like to use long runs as like practices for what you're going to do during race week, right? So thinking about the night before a long run, whether you're training for a race or not, we really want to try and just increase that carbohydrate content. So making sure we're having some extra carbs on our plate. We probably Everyone's different. Everyone's stomach is different in what they can tolerate. But for a lot of people, it might be a good idea to not have something super fibrous, like maybe not having like black bean soup the night before a long run, because it might just cause gastric distress. And same goes for fat. Like sometimes if you have like fried chicken, that might just not sit well in your belly the next day. Everyone's different. Some people have stomachs of steel. I do not. So that's just something I have to pay attention to. I can't have something particularly fiber rich or high fat the night before my long run, and then increasing that carbohydrate. And we're increasing it with foods that are not super high in fiber. So maybe it would be something like extra brown rice or extra like farro on your plate, or like an extra slice of bread. So just having a little bit of extra carb. If you are somebody training for a race, especially as we get closer to race day, you might want to ask yourself, what am I realistically going to eat the night before my race, right? Like if you make like, I don't know, some special food that you can only make in your house, and then you're at a restaurant in Chicago, it would just be nice to practice having like plain old pasta and tomato sauce if that's what's readily available when you're at a restaurant in Chicago. So just keeping that in mind. If you're training for a race that's going to take more than 90 minutes, you might want to consider carb loading. Research is iffy if what works for women or not, but it is something that I tend to recommend to athletes because I feel like it's one of the things that isn't going to hurt you and potentially can help you.
And why the extra carbs in that meal the night before? What's that doing for our body?
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to set ourselves up for success. So when we're eating that extra carbohydrate, we're helping to saturate. So I want you to think of like a sponge, right? So if we are adding extra carbs to our plate, this is kind of filling our sponge or our muscles' glycogen, our stored sugar, with extra sugar, which can actually help us to feel like our long run, our effort is easier the next day. So by having some extra carb as a nighttime snack or on your dinner plate, however you want to set it up, we're filling up that sponge with extra water so we have like extra energy to squeeze out of it during our run the next day.
Good visual. And a reminder that those extra carbs also actually make you hold on to a little bit of water. So don't freak out about your weight. That's a good thing. We want that water so that you aren't going to get quite so dehydrated so quickly during your run. So all kinds of benefits there.
Yeah.
Okay. We are going to point you to a couple of other resources that you can look at because you have now figured out that nutrition is probably an area you need to work on. So look in the what's next section, and we will make sure we keep giving you more tips so that you can keep going. Thanks so much, Serena.
Thank you.